So there's a question someone asked me, and it was, how do you remember all the way back to Hathor? And I said, it's somewhere, you can recall any time in history, even 500,000 years ago or whatever it was, 650. And it's there when you read the archive of, say, the tablets that had the information of the language of our incarnation written on the walls of great temples like Dendera. So what I find is I look at it and I know what it means. And I realized about Hathor, it is an amazing movie because it has in the areas beside it, like Abydos and other areas, Karnak, it has the history of the biggest Egyptian gods that we have in Egyptian history. So it's an incredible story. It's almost like the early god superheroes come from those original places along that geographical area. So it's very exciting to look into the lives of these. And as I said, history is totally screwed up. I was looking at this at like 1 o'clock in the morning, making notes for the next day once, and thinking, this is crazy. They've got these beings all the way into the future in other dynasties depicted where it was incorrect. So to sift through all this is absolute hell. But I've gotten to a point now where I know who the key players were, who was there, who they were, and can go ahead with a story, which is a fantastic story of the very beginning of a representation of what we term the Horus eye or the camera eye in Stargate of Success, the Blue Matrix teaching, which is why this movie is very important, because it will give the correct history about where that has come from. So the way I'm writing the story is a lot of it is based on fact with fictionalized storyline woven into it that will make this epic very engaging, entertaining, and be very educational and of high educational value. So that's been very exciting. At the same time, I was slapped with such a huge chaos in the skies, which I almost lost my life again. I was just, could not believe it. I could barely get up. I was crawling almost for 3 days, and it was very difficult. So it's so ironic, when you get to something very good you're working on, and then you have this huge problem again with extraterrestrial problems in the skies that kind of debilitates you and sets you back, and you're like, how am I going to get through this project? I need to remember, I need to sit and apply myself and get this story out, because it will correct history. And it will even help historians when they look at my work, movies like that I've written all through it, like Angel and, Andromeda Return of Alexandria, and, this Hathor movie as well as Freya. So there are very historically valid films that I'm writing that historians will be able to look at and see in their own stories and report that they've gotten through reading the archives. Problem is, when it isn't your archive from your past life and you read it and you don't remember the ancient initiations and what it really meant, you don't always interpret things correctly. Basically, all historians said is that Egypt had a religion of worshiping the sun or whatever, or different gods, and it isn't really correct, because it was the acknowledgement of the inner self as the being that turns on the light to be able to then facilitate these great technologies and these great cities, because there are tablets that show different deities levitating, floating off of the ground. And in Hathor also, it wasn't really a lot of extraterrestrial activity in that time, the way that we had later, with similar to what we've had over Earth today, which happened during the Apis Bull era. There were 70 kings in 70 days changed. It was also one of the last eras where we had the very tall people and animals. The Apis Bull sarcophagus is huge. There's some huge bull in there. And there was, from my memory, I may have been deceased at that time actually, because I have a different memory. What I remember was that there was a lot of firing of ships and warring. And also during the time of Djoser, there was a very high extraterrestrial engagement that was chaotic. And also later in the time of Isis and Osiris, because when Osiris was taken apart, as the story goes, and cast into different places, that's not unlike what's happened with some of the wars in the skies, information engagement of people, where there was entanglement across space-time and terrible pressure of pulling on people. So that is also Osiris has gone through that. So Hathor is largely a very happy story that has innovation and the beginning of the great culture of Egypt that had these key, huge gods, deities that were in these famous areas like Dendra, Abydos, Karnak, Luxor. So all of them were along the same area, and there was this development that was flourishing. So it's a very, very interesting story that, for the variety of reasons that I have mentioned, will be of great interest to the public. So that was my continued coverage of where I'm at and how it's going with the writing of the great epic Hathor.